Hello everybody, welcome to the Student Lawyers Facebook Live. Thank you for tuning in on this lovely Tuesday evening. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Promise it won't keep you too long. We are very lucky today because we have a very special guest, Coral Hill. Coral is the immediate past president of the Westminster and Holborn Law Society. She is a professor at the University of Law and has been for the past 17 years and is involved in countless societies and associations. So thank you very much for being here today.
Delighted, thanks for asking me.
Okay, so let's get started because we've got lots of questions for Coral today. The first question is, why did you decide to study law and what was your early career as a solicitor like?
Okay, so in fact, although I was interested in the law, I did philosophy and classics originally, and that was in the days when you got full grants, so I could choose whatever I liked and still have them grant to do a conversion course afterwards. So I took a more roundabout route and did what's now the graduate diploma in law, and then went on to do training to become a solicitor and so on. But I was interested in it. I did have a member of the family who'd been in law, but it was just something that grabbed my fancy really.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate with my early career. I went to a lovely nurturing firm called Hempson's, which still exists, and they act primarily in clinical negligence cases, but I did a whole variety of things while I was there, court of appeal cases, and even helped with a House of Lords case, which is still a precedent, which is rather lovely. I knew even then that it was a great firm. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in practice, and I spent 2 years. I moved on to Manchys, which is now Pennington's Manchys. I did a couple of years of commercial litigation just to be sure, and then I made my exit because it wasn't for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's good that you stuck to it and really saw it out before deciding to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I wanted to have a good chunk of time actually knowing that I could do the job and that I was competent at it. So I could go back if I wanted
to. So a common question for law students is, are you more inclined to take the solicitor or barrister route after university? Teaching is not always mentioned though. I know for myself I've had that question lots of times. Why did you decide to start teaching?
I think for me it was probably a little bit different because my first job was teaching English language and literature in Sudan, so it was always something that I did see as a possible path. But I don't think it is commonly, unless you're going to be an academic, people don't tend to think about combining the two, although in Europe it's normal to both be qualified and to teach. So it's certainly very rewarding. So something I would recommend.
A number of my teachers at Birkbeck actually are practicing lawyers as well as teachers, so that's quite interesting. So I'm very fortunate to work within barrister chambers in Lincoln's Inn, and I have a rough idea of what I want to do after I will finish my degree. But for students who have not yet been exposed to the practical sides of the legal profession, how would you suggest they decide what area of law they might like to get involved in?
Well, it's really something you just have to experiment with because nobody knows until they've tried it. We are all exposed to criminal law primarily through all the great, things we see on TV, suits, etc., etc. But it's only when you get into a situation that you know, or you start to understand what's involved and what it would mean for your daily life. So it really is a question of just giving it a go and seeing what it's like. And I think law degrees are incredibly transferable skills.
Yes.
So even if you don't, like as I didn't want to be a practicing solicitor, there will always be something. There's such a host of things that you can do, and people really like law degrees. It makes you understand society, its structures. So if you don't want to actually stay directly in the law profession, there's all sorts of things you can do outside of it. House of Parliament, government work, getting involved in charities, pressure groups, equality issues, all sorts of things. A legal background's always helpful.
That's very promising. Can we open so many doors for you?
Yeah, I think so.
So, as a first year law student, I'm planning to take full advantage of having you here today and speaking candidly on behalf of my fellow first years all around the world. How do you recommend managing a busy lifestyle, managing stress that comes with just life in general and studying, and also how to get grades that are reflective of the work that we put into studying?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question. I don't know if I've got all the answers, but certainly one of them is setting boundaries for yourself and for others. So I think it's something worth whoever you're living with, your family environment, whatever, is worth being very clear with them about when you're studying and what space you need and so on. I think as well as doing that, it's about developing a routine for yourself so that you're not having all-nighters trying to write stuff and getting everything out of perspective and so on. I think the other key thing, which sounds really basic, is having a mobile not only on sign up but out of sight. There's actually quite a lot of evidence and research showing that the level of distraction of just having a mobile there for all of us, including me, is substantial, and we don't realise it. So it actually is that feeling of wanting to reach out for your mobile. So that's the one thing I would get it out of the way for however long it is, and you'll be amazed how much more work you get done.
It's funny, I'm very good at telling myself, no, I have to go to bed now because I need to get my sleep. But putting the phone out of reach is something that I'm not so good at.
There's the person who actually developed, one of the co-founders of Twitter. He's got a book out at the moment, and it's all about techniques on how to manage it, how to turn it off, where to hide the apps so that they're not so tempting, because it's like a bit of chocolate.
Yes, you can get those app blockers, can't you, to stop. Strangely, I haven't got around to downloading that one yet. All the other apps are available.
Give it a go.
Rather the app blocker. So going back to school, before the academic year begun, I was fortunate enough to attend lots of study skill workshops that I found were very helpful and prepared me for the real deal. We covered stuff like essay writing, academic reading, all stuff that you need before starting a degree. All very helpful. I'm 5 weeks in now and things are building up. I'm starting to maybe forget some stuff that I've learned and maybe picking up bad, just bad habits again. So how would you suggest
just trying to tackle it?
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds mostly what we're talking about is organisational skills, which is difficult for all of us, and I think everybody's lives are busier and busier, both electronically and with paperwork. And I think the key thing I would suggest is making sure you don't repeat anything. So I often have students who diligently write down notes and things, and then they transfer those notes to a file, they then type them up, and then make sure there's none of that going on. It's a basic management technique that you should never pick up a piece of paper more than once, or you should never open an email more than once, that sort of thing. So it's the same when you're organising study. You want to make sure if you're going in to listen to something and you're taking notes, it's in the right book, so you don't have to go home and sort it out. It's already in there. So I think a lot of that is by taking a little bit of time thinking about how you file, what files you're going to use, how it's going to be prepared, rather than just writing on a loose leaf sheet and then having to try and sort it all out later.
I've got Evernote, so it's like an online notebook, if you like. So I don't find myself having to carry around lots of notebooks with me. It's all there. The only one thing is my teachers have told me to try different methods. So it's trying to, maybe test writing down on a piece of paper or Cornell notes or stuff like that. So for me, starting off now, although I'm fairly confident that I've got my template on my laptop okay, it's actually putting the practice in of setting these notes out. But I think that will just come with time.
Usually that's going to be, I'm at through whatever seminars you've got and exercises and so on. So I would suggest having a book, not a loose leaf thing, an actual book that you just write through it, you write from the start to the finish like you would an exercise book at school, and then it's not going to get lost. It's that book that, make it one colour for each
Yeah.
subject, that kind of thing. And then it will go with your online notes. But if you are doing online stuff,
Yeah.
you need a good filing system as well,
Yeah.
because most people just don't have it filed properly online.
Yeah, okay, that's very helpful. So the lecture slides are often online before lectures, and a recording is available to download almost immediately after. Because of this, attendance at lectures is perhaps not as high as it possibly was or could be. How important do you think it is to actually turn up and be present?
I think this depends entirely on your learning preference.
Right.
I actually like lectures, and provided it's a good lecturer, it's definitely, I think, worth going, because usually they give you a kind of coat hanger of where the overview is, and then you can build on that. I actually don't think it matters really whether you go or you watch the recording, as long as you're focused and you're engaged. Okay. Then you will take it in. But one thing I would suggest, which I would back up your lecturers, is variety. So some weeks go, some weeks don't. If you do the same thing week in, week out, you will be phasing out, your mind will phase out. You will just do that.
Good to know. Right, so what traits and behaviours have you noticed among those who achieve a first-class degree?
Curiosity,
right.
Reflection, and challenging ideas, I would say. So obviously getting a first-class degree is always hard work. So it means somebody's put a lot of effort in. Mm-hmm. But I think what distinguishes that student is they're not just reading all the time, they're thinking. And it's making that leap, and it's another reason why you don't want your mobile there, is because people read off their mobiles and they think they know this stuff, they don't. And again, it's probably what your lecturers are saying, just because you've got it online, it doesn't mean that you actually have a deep in learning of it. So that exercise of doing something creative with it, whether it's mind maps or writing essays or whatever it is you're doing, is what creates the deep learning. And I think students who get first class are much more attuned to doing that. Right. They're much more aware of the implications. It may be just what they do because of their curiosity. They're not actually planning it. And also forcing yourself to think through scenarios and apply legal principles is much harder work than reading and writing. So actually thinking, here's the principle, here's the problem, or looking at a case, why did they come to that judgment, reading the judgments properly and actually understanding them. And I think if you follow that system of study, it also means you have a lot less revision to do, because you know the principles, because you've really gone through it yourself, so it's really deep inside you. And then it means when you come to revising, you can spend a lot more time looking at articles or doing the bits that other people don't have time for.
Very, very good to know. So being very active, asking questions, why, really just getting stuck in. So that takes us on to the next question. Which bad habits should students be cautious about falling into?
I think the key one is just being negative, because it's self-fulfilling. So you've got to believe in yourself, and also don't beat yourself up. If you've been ill or you've missed something that you wanted to do, it's life, that's going to happen. Yeah. So just pick yourself up. Just because you had a bad day yesterday, make sure you make it count today and get on with it. Yeah. I think the worst thing is people feeling they've fallen behind, and then they get more behind and more behind. Yeah. So it's just about saying, okay, that's what's happened, fresh day, move on.
Yeah, tomorrow's a new start, don't dwell on the past.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm constantly being told to get to my rest, even though I've just admitted that I'm ready to clock off at 7:30 at night and call it a night. But another thing that I'm constantly being told is make sure you maintain a social life, don't spend all of your spare time in a library. What is the best way to balance work, rest, playtime? What are your suggestions for that?
It is difficult, but I would say that routine is probably the best one. I was never very good at this myself as a student, but I was good at not working in the evenings. And that's a good thing, because if you sleep well, you keep everything in perspective and you work better if you're healthy. If you just grinding away in the library every night is just going to make you dull. And it won't help. It won't help. But I think in terms of balancing, it is just about making sure that you've got some routine in there, and that you use all those half hours. Rather than doing a bit of social media, you actually use the half an hour is a long time. So typically between 5 and 7, that's time that you could all use, and that's something you could discuss with your family. I'm not going to be able to cook every night. You know, if you've got whoever around, can we have a rota? That's a great time to study, 5 to 7, and then you can go out.
Why do you say 5 to 7?
Just because it's people treat it as dead time.
Right.
They usually have a cup of tea, catch up on the news, chat with each other, and so on. And particularly if you're working or you've been busy in the day, 5 to 7 is just a time people don't often use, and it's a lot of time in the day.
Golden time. Right. I'm trying to think what I do at 5 to 7, and can't really think. That probably means it's a good space to fill.
Maybe you're on the tube, so you can read something on the tube or have a podcast.
I was going to say the ULaw podcast, but next question then is, there are so many extracurricular activities for students to join while studying. Do you think this is beneficial for students to get involved in networks and societies?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Anything and everything. I mean, to me, that's what being educated is, having an interest and getting involved in all these things. It doesn't have to be law. So you will learn just as much going to a debating society on astrophysics or whatever it is. But the more you go out, meet different types of people, get the confidence of listening to people and asking questions, try and push yourself into a situation where you're not just totally in your comfort zone on the back seat, on the back row. Ask a question, builds your confidence. So I think apart from just being interesting, it's invaluable for lawyers.
About being curious as well.
Yes, yeah.
So what support groups are there for women, as you're involved in so many societies and associations yourself?
Sure, I mean, this is a particular interest of mine, but I do think if you're in any group that has been habitually discriminated against, and although women are a majority in the law profession, they do suffer systematic discrimination, obviously not in every firm, I'm not suggesting that, or that it's always conscious. But I think support groups for any minority group or group that suffered discrimination are important. And what they do is just, A, give you somebody to talk to, make you very aware of how other people are being treated and whether your reaction is appropriate. Are you uncomfortable just because it's something to do with the individual situation? Or in fact, when you ask everybody, does everyone say, yeah, that happened to me too, and it's not fair? And then you will feel more confident, and people may have set ways of going back, say, well, this is how I tackled it.
Yeah.
And also, I think they're important because women have only been allowed to be lawyers for just under 100 years, coming up to the 100th anniversary. So those networks just haven't been there. And I know we can be offhand about old boys networks, but actually, it's most groups will have a network where they will help you, mentor you, recommend you, and women need that. So you need to be in some group. And the more you can reach out like that, the more the opportunities will come to you.
Fantastic. Can you tell me a little about Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee?
Okay, so it's quite, everyone's calling them that now, EDI committees. I have always been interested in equality. I think partly my parents were, my mother was from Ireland and suffered a lot of discrimination when she first came to England. And I was very aware of that. And I think from that, I was probably interested in it in a kind of philosophical way. Like, why are people entitled to be equal? And if you meet someone who says it doesn't matter, what arguments can you bring up? So I was always very interested about it in the actual theory. And then I guess that's just transferred itself into the practice, partly through the women's sports groups, etc., that I've been involved with and changing things in that dimension, but more widely dealing with students from completely different social backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, etc., and just seeing how different mixes of people work together or don't work together and how to work around that. And of course, it's an issue that is absolutely fundamental at the moment, I think. And all law firms are trying to tackle it, and barristers' chambers and so on, all workplaces are looking at that. So the EDI, the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, is there to support people, to help them, and also to nudge them sometimes. So a recent example is I had a chat with the chairman of a particular committee and just said, you probably haven't realised, but all your panels of speakers are of this type. And it was just like, oh yeah, you're right. And so they will now make an effort. So just put a reach out, and there will be people there. And sometimes we're so busy, it's not that people are deliberately trying to discriminate. It's often unconscious. It's just people we know. It's easy, but it's about challenging yourself and making sure that you reach out. Yeah.
So commercial awareness is an important skill that is not being taught in the classroom, but is still very important. How do you suggest students keep up with current affairs?
I think this is very easy. You just pick one or two things to follow, such as this studentlawyer.com. Legal cheek, I like, as the name suggests. It's a bit cheeky, it's a bit funny. And lawquiz.net. Any of those. Don't follow loads. You only need one or two. You don't even need to read them as you're going along. Just keep them stored somewhere. And if you get an interview, speed read through. And they will all have summaries on commercial issues or the major cases that have happened or whatever. So if you want to go and you want to be able to talk knowledgeably about the Supreme Court decision on the prorogation of Parliament, there's a summary there for you. So it's not difficult. It's just don't try and keep up with it all the time.
Just be curious. I'm loving this word. It applies to everything. So once again, I'm going to use myself as an example for this question. I come from a low-income family, and I'm also a mature student. I work full-time, and this isn't what is considered as a normal student of law, or any student of that matter. Universities are seeing more and more diverse students enrol. What effect do you predict this will have on the legal profession in years to come?
Well, I hope it means that there will be empathy and people able to relate to clients in all types of situations. I think what's difficult is that because the role of being a lawyer is quite set, is that by the time people have qualified, everybody assumes that you are this sort of person, which may not be true at all. But what I would hope is that with more diversity, I think this is already happening, that people are able to relate to clients, are able to adapt their language so that people can understand what's going on instead of always talking in very complicated terms and using Latin, etc. So I think it will have an impact, and it will just make it a more interesting environment for us.
Hopefully. So keep getting variety in the profession. Okay, so the last question from me is, what are your thoughts on SQE? Do you think it will increase diversity or make law even more competitive?
It's early days yet for the SQE. Obviously, we don't know all the details. I'm very much in favour of having a national exam. I think that's a great thing. Whether the SQE will actually turn out to be cheaper or create more diversity, I'm not sure. It's difficult to say at this stage, but from my perspective, I think although the SQE 1, the exam itself, will be cheaper, I think you will be an exceptionally special person to be able to go and sit those exams without a preparation course. And therefore you've got the same obstacle of a reasonably expensive course to prepare for it. So that's my key reservation. On the other hand, if you're going to give it a go, you might find that just doing the SQE 1 is enough for you to think that's not what I want to do, and so you're not going to spend the money on the second bit. It also means that there's this gap where you could get the SQE 1, go to firms and they will sponsor you to do the much more expensive bit, which will be the skills bit, the second part of the SQE.
Great. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last part of the interview now, and those are questions coming from the viewers. So I'm just going to get it up. So the first question is, you recommended reading and properly understanding judgments. Do you have any tips for how to easily digest a 50-page judgment?
Just on its own, perhaps not, because but whereas if you were looking at a particular case, I think you can recommend ways to start. I think what you definitely want to do is get really familiar with the head note and how everything's laid out. I think with all reading, whether it's a judgment or not, you should get a feel for the overall thing. So that means looking at the beginning, flicking through it and reading the end. Find the actual result, because very often they're going to be going through the facts. Lots of cases you might get completely lost, and particularly if it's an appeal case, a lot of people are unsure who the appellant is by the time they get to the end, and they will normally say, I find for the appellant, or words to that effect, and they don't actually know who's won. So you need to be very clear about who the parties are, and if it's an appeal, who it is that's appealing. So I think making sure you understand all the beginnings, who the parties are, have a look at who's acted for them, have a look at the end. And if it's a 50-page judgment and there's some other judge who agrees, but they do a nice short one, have a start with that.
Okay.
Give yourself a break.
Give yourself an easy life. Second question is, what revision techniques are the most effective for law?
I don't think there's a single answer for that. It has to come back to variety. I don't think there's, what I would say is making sure that you build in enough variety to keep yourself going, stimulated and so on. So like I said about perhaps going to lectures, sometimes listening to recordings, another time podcasts. I used to like using colour and mind maps, but just doing anything that's creative. So I don't think there's a set approach that I would recommend.
Right. Next question is, how important is it to read the further reading that is listed?
It's there for a reason.
Right.
So for most exams, they will be looking to see what your knowledge and understanding is, and most people will be able to achieve that by going to decent lectures and reading the basics. What you're unlikely to be able to do is to go on and analyse and synthesise the material, and that's where you start getting to the higher grades. So the further reading will contribute to that. So again, I think if you've got a massive list, it's probably not that they're saying read every single word. It's like, here are different books you ought to have heard of. That's number one. So just making sure you're familiar with the different authors. And then perhaps picking something that appeals to you, somebody who writes in a way that you can relate to, or even that the text is a nice size, that sort of thing. Because, so it's easy to read, you feel comfortable reading it. And if you're very stuck for time, look for good quality articles.
Right. Okay, that's good. All the tips and tricks that I'm certainly going to be taking on board with my studies anyway. So that's it for the viewers' questions. Thank you once again for coming and joining us. And I'm going to be putting this on a rewind as soon as I get home to make all my notes and practicing writing up all those different techniques. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I always feel like I need support.